So welcome to today's webinar from Carebeans about cyber security and potential attacks to healthcare organisations. Fabio, our CTO, our Chief Technical Officer, will be taking you through kinds of attacks, cyber attacks and security, and what you should be doing as an organisation to ensure that you are safe. And over to you then, Fabio. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Carl. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar on cybersecurity. Today, we aim to provide you with a wider understanding of cybercrime and how to reduce the risk profile of your business. We hope that by lifting the veil of the people behind hacking and revealing their motivations, you can better understand the risks and what type of malicious actors are likely to target your business and whichever way. My name is Fabio Moraes. I'm the CTO at Carebeans. I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years. Have started as a software engineer and have worked with different sectors, airspace, energy, mining, to name a few. Cybersecurity was always a topic of interest to me, and as a result, I'm a certified penetration tester, which obviously enables me to better support when it comes to reducing the cyber risk. So today's agenda is to offer a better understanding of the scale of the problem, the financial reputation and consequences of cyber incidents, and how to mitigate those risks. So let's dive right in, I suppose, with an overview of cybercrime in the UK's healthcare sector. Around 62% of healthcare organizations have suffered at least one incident in the last 24 months. And bearing in mind that not all incidents are reported, 62% obviously is a huge percentage, is a huge amount of organizations being affected. 64 of those affected have cancelled appointments and firmly believe that the failure of their systems, so that the incident itself could have led to loss of life because it was that severe. Almost half of the incidents result with physical attacks, which means it's via USBs or CD-ROMs or etc., or also through IoT, so anything that is connected to the networks. And over 35% of the breaches result from staff sharing sensitive information with someone that was not privy to that sort of details. So this is just to give an overview of the current status quo in the UK, which is not brilliant, but there's a lot of things that can obviously be done to improve it. So as we aim to do today is give a better understanding of type of actors that are out there. So in terms of categories, there's three main categories for hackers. Black hats, which are individuals that obviously have malicious intent. They try to break into networks, computers, mobile devices, etc. with and sometimes they are linked with organized crime as well, with the intent obviously mainly for financial gain. So that's the main purpose of black hats and their motivations behind them. White hats are known as the cybersecurity experts that obviously are commissioned to simulate attacks and help businesses in other ways. But mainly, one of the main tasks is to simulate attacks and provide recommendations on how to resolve the issues that have been found. This is obviously also known as pen testing or ethical hacking. Grey hat, as the name potentially suggests, is someone that actually sits somewhere in the middle. It could either be a former black hat that is now working with law enforcement and trying to support it that way. So it's becoming from a transition from black hat to grey hat, or it could be someone that is working with cybersecurity, working within cybersecurity, but also carries out activities that are deemed less ethical. So those are the three main categories for for hackers. So we now look at a bit more in depth on their motivations, so the reasons why they do what they do. So thrill seekers, the motivation is obviously to gain popularity in some way, shape, or form. These type of actors are often teenagers, and they rely on existing exploitation techniques ready available on the internet, and this is how they obviously carry out the attacks. There's also ideology-driven type of actors, such as activists. They will have a good technical knowledge, and they don't rely simply on the available tools. They'll have really good knowledge, and often they target networks using DDoS attacks, DDoS type of attacks. The main reason behind it is because the main intent is to cause disruption, and that's DDoS attack is a quick way of achieving that. Further on, we have obviously organized crime, criminals with the intent of motivated by profit. They can carry out really sophisticated types of attacks, but they do mainly use techniques like phishing and ransomware to trick users to provide information that otherwise they wouldn't be privy to, and obviously using that information for their own gain, and usually, like I said, is to get money out of people. Preferred methods: ransomware, because obviously ransomware encrypts the machines, and they can that way they can obviously extract huge amounts of money from the victims. Other category or other type of actors are the insiders. This would be employees that are planning to leave or have left the business, not in a very friendly way, and they would rely on the inside knowledge to be able to bypass security systems, with the main purpose of obviously causing disruption to the business they just left or will be leaving, and usually they do that by stealing proprietary information and either selling it or just releasing it online to cause as much damage as possible. Other type of actors are state or privately funded. They are highly technical, and they are also able to create their own exploits. The reason behind it is obviously to get proprietary information or to carry out sabotage. This is obviously falls under industrial espionage. And they will be, like I said, highly technical and use very sophisticated type of attacks. Terrorism or terrorists, again, ideology driven. They commonly seek to sabotage critical infrastructure. One example that always comes to mind is an incident that occurred in Canada where a traffic light system was hacked and caused major disruption in a city in Canada. So that sort of attacks fall under this terrorism, and obviously the common actions and motivations are to cause as much damage and sabotage critical infrastructure. So how do these attacks are performed? Usually hacking goes through 5 phases. The first one is the recon, where there's a lot of effort put into obtaining information, gathering information, or as much detail as possible from the businesses or from the individuals that are the intended victims. This could be used as a range of techniques, such as sniffing packages on the network. It could be through social media, social engineering, and so on. So this phase, this initial phase, is where the hackers spend more time, which is then followed by the scanning phase. So once all this information is gathered, further details are trying to be collected through using tools that allow to scan the networks and provide as much information about the target machines. And obviously that associated with information that was collected previously will allow the hacker to move to the third phase, which is gaining access. So this is where the actual attempts to hack into systems or networks occurs. And obviously this is using all the information collected before. Once access is gained, the next stage would be to maintain access. This is usually through opening backdoors, which allow the hackers to access the victim's machines without going through the previous phases. So he opens the back door and they can access it anytime without going obviously through all the previous effort. Once that is all done, the final stage is to clear the tracks, basically erase any sort of evidence that could link to an incident and also link to themselves. So obviously, as long as those things are done properly, the victim would be unaware that it has been hacked until the last minute, and also it would be very, very hard to trace back that attack to the individual. So there are multiple types of breaches. The more common ones, which are the ones we're going to be focusing today, are ransomware and phishing, which I mentioned before. These are the ones that carry out a higher success rate. And ransomware, as I mentioned before, is where the software that makes data or systems completely unusable. So this is done through encryption. Either mobile phones, laptops, servers, or any other type of equipment can be encrypted. And once the data is encrypted, the keys are only released if the victim makes a payment. And ransomware is evolving currently. It's moving from the current format, which is obviously expecting payment for the decryption of the data, to also, after payment has been made, to still release the data on the dark web to try to obtain more money out of the data that's been stolen. So it gets a double whammy. So it gets the money from the victim and also money from other parties that might be interested in that type of data. So it's quite evolving quite rapidly and is creating a lot of issues. DDoS, we mentioned this before, basically is a overloading of services, of requests to, for example, a website, to a point where the machine does not know how to cope with all that volume of incoming connections or incoming requests, and it just drops. It can't handle it, and it becomes unresponsive. So that brings systems down or websites down, and they become completely unusable. Brute force attacks, it's a technique to try to break down passwords using obviously a lot of the CPU power to try to break through those passwords. Dictionary attacks, it's similar to brute force attacks, but obviously uses well-known words to try to crack down those passwords, and also uses existing or common usernames as well. So it's another form of brute force attack. Download attack is when someone downloads something on their machine and installs something or allows that particular piece of malware to be executed in any way, shape, or form, and obviously then creating usually a backdoor to that particular machine and rendering that machine vulnerable to a hacker that can access it at any given point. Phishing, it's again one of the biggest type of breaches and one of the most successful. And there's several types of phishing. The one is an untargeted massive email, so that's sent to a lot of people. And if you think about phishing as a large net that is thrown into the ocean to try to get as much fish as possible, this is exactly the same method. Is trying to get you send a mass emails and you try to get someone to click on the links and interact with it. Spear phishing is similar, but obviously is more targeted. So rather than sending mass emails, it would be targeted through a specific group or specific individuals. And whaling is even more specific, is usually aimed at C-level executives, directors, and so on, that will potentially interact with those emails and open breaches through the top of the hierarchy of that business. So that's what whaling is all about. Social engineering, this takes usually two forms, which is one is manipulating people into carrying out specific actions and sharing information that they shouldn't be sharing, or also by targeted social media scanning. So pictures or information that is posted on social media that can then be used against the victims. Finally, waterholing is the setting up of a fake website that will be really well crafted to simulate the real deal, and users would then be prompted to enter confidential data such as names, date of births, addresses, and so on, and all that data will be captured and then obviously used against the people that have entered that information. So these are some of the most common types of attacks and breaches. So in terms of the distribution of these actual breaches, you'll see that the vast majority still comes from hacking itself. So the actual activities that we've been highlighting, but there's also a big percentage that is down to human error and things like social engineering that we mentioned before. So those two combined still makes a big portion of the source of data breaches, and this is where obviously there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of training and raising awareness to people so that these percentages can be highly reduced. You'll see that, for example, physical data breaches like using a USB or a CD-ROM, they have been massively reduced in the past 5 years, because those things are no longer used as much as other means of getting data into and transferring data from one machine to the other. So this is why there's a big reduction there. Malware has been reduced as well. Is not used as much as in the last few years, but still quite significant there. So, and this is just to give you an overview of how long does it take to crack a password, and we have here on this table, most people will use 8 characters, and you will see that with 8 characters, even using upper and lowercase letters with numbers and symbols, nowadays with the new CPU power that it is out there, it takes about 40 minutes to crack a password, which is quite alarming. And nowadays, obviously, the recommendation is to move away from 8-character passwords. Some people recommend 12, which you'll see on the table, that if it still can be easily cracked. The new recommendation is really to go to a minimum of 16 characters using a combination of numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and symbols, because that, even with the new computing processor that it is up there, it becomes really difficult to crack those passwords. So the lengthier it is, the password, and the more combinations with characters and numbers, the merrier, as you can see on this table. So we quick look into some case studies here, some major incidents that occurred in healthcare. We start with one that happened here in the UK, where back in 2017, a ransomware attack called WannaCry affected 80 hospital trusts across England, and with 100,000 people affected, and ultimately the ICO fined the NHS around £100 million, sorry. in result to the breaches that occurred back in 2017. So it was a huge problem for the NHS back in 2017. Other example, which happened in the US, where back in 2015, 79 million personal health information records were stolen. This was using a phishing attack. And there was a calculated cost of $115 million to that particular business. Obviously, this was a combination of fines and obviously another costs to recover from that attack. So it was a combined cost of $150 million. In 2018, another American agency was hacked, and 26 million people were affected by this, with $4 million paid in compensation. This was is not here on the presentation, but this was also a phishing attack. Finally, another example, very similar, another phishing attack also occurred in the US, where documents were downloaded and through a phishing attack that contained malware, and obviously affected millions of people, with an estimated cost to that particular company of $74 million. So as you can see, the consequences of these attacks are not small, and when they do happen, the impact to the business is extremely severe, not just financially, but reputation as well is very severe. So once these attacks occur, what happens to that data? Where does that data go, and where is those transactions occur? So all of these things happen in the dark web. And to give you a bit more context of how the dark web fits in the web context, the web is usually split in three categories. So the surface web, which is about 4% of what we see, that's the information that is public and is accessed through your normal search engines like Firefox, Chrome, and so on. 90% of the web is composed by is what's called the deep web, and is composed by legal, medical records, databases, and so on, and even things like subscription-only information like Netflix. This is what comprises of the biggest chunk of the internet, is what is called the deep web. The dark web is only about 60%, and it is a mix of criminal activities with things like human rights activism and whistleblowing, for example. But obviously the main thing that happened on the dark web is criminal activities. This is where your data ends up. This is where the data is transitioned and is sold, and or just released for with the intent of causing as much damage as possible. So what does the dark web look like? I took the liberty of going on the dark web and taking a few screenshots to be able to show you today. And this is one of the websites on the dark web, where we can see here that there is a UK passport being sold, and for the price of £850, and you'll get a full passport with all the details that you need to be able to use it. And this is obviously just to give you an idea of the sort of things that are being sold on the dark web. We have a similar example here, but is a US version of it. So you can become a US citizen with full social security number, driving license, even birth certificate for the price of $4,000. So you get the full shebang for $4,000. You become a US citizen. Another example here where you can potentially hire a hacker yourself, and this particular individual calls himself Vladimir, and he says that he can, and I have no doubts that he can hack into Facebook and Twitter accounts. He can do DDoS attacks. He can remote control phones for someone else. And obviously the price range is there, as you can see. Controlling someone's phone, $700. Hacking into Facebook and Twitter, $500, and so on. And you can get a full package about $1,800. So as you can see, hacking different prices for different hacking services here being sold on the dark web. Another example here, credit cards, where you can potentially buy bundles of credit cards. Obviously, all of them come with the respective CVE codes, full name, addresses, and so on. So in case if you, after purchasing those credit cards, if you are purchasing something online, and if the CVE is requested, you have all that information, and all according to this website, all these credit cards have credit on them, so you can use them once you get them at home and once you make the purchase. So that's the sort of things that you will see on the dark web. This is where the data ends up, and this is the sort of criminal activities that occur on the dark web, for example. And again, just to give you an idea of how much your data is worth, some of the profile accounts like LinkedIn, Facebook, and so on, they will be selling at $1 per profile. Bank credit card details obviously is worth a bit more. It ranges from $5 to $30. A full new identity, and we've seen an example there of a US identity of $4,000, but there are other websites that sell it for a much lower price, usually averages on about $3,000. And one of the biggest things on the dark web is obviously personal health information, which averages on around $350 per record. So that all of that combined, just to give us an idea, cybercrime is nowadays worth $3 trillion globally, and this was in 2020. But because it's growing on average 15% per year, it would be a much higher figure now, and it is so big that it would qualify as the world's 50th largest economy. So it would be bigger than the UK's economy, just to give you an idea. Also, another alarming statistic is that 40% of the businesses that do get hacked, they will stop trading. So they will not recover from the financial reputational implications of it, and they will stop trading, which is obviously quite a dramatic outcome of an event. And all this data, and the data we've been referring throughout this presentation, 92% is unaccounted for. So only 8% is actually being reported at the moment. So there's a lot more going on that we don't know, and the figures obviously would be a lot higher than this. Another alarming statistic here is that only 5% of the corporate data is properly protected. This means that businesses usually make a lot of effort or put a lot of effort in protecting the outer layer of the network with firewalls and so on. But in the case of an event, in the case that someone successfully breaches into that network, they will then have access to all the data because the data inside is not encrypted, for example. So once they go through that first layer, they get access to everything. So it's quite important to obviously encrypt that data, and only 5% of that data is actually at the moment protected. 60% of cybersecurity professionals agree that at the moment is pretty much a losing battle, because there are a lot more black hats out there than white hats, and there's a real need for more manpower and support for within cybersecurity to help defend against this increasing wave of criminal activities. Also, out of interest, the Internet of Things, so the likes of your TVs, your Alexas, and so on, which is part of the IoT, attacks to these sort of devices have increased over 500%, and this was just between 2016 to 2017. Obviously, the figures are much higher now in 2022, although we don't have those full statistics yet. So having all these things, having said all these things, what can be done to reduce the risk of cyber attacks? The main thing to do to reduce the risk is to raise awareness, is to educate people, and educate people that are critical to the business, to the organizations. And this would obviously include your supply chain, and raising the awareness and delivering cybersecurity training is probably the best thing that can be done, is the most efficient thing that can be done to prevent and to reduce the risk of cyber attacks, because the more people are informed and the more people are aware of the risks, they will be more careful, and that will eventually reduce the risk, and the impact will be quite significant. Obviously, keeping software up to date. So when there are updates for software, for your phones, for your tablets, for your computers, and so on, it's quite important to install all the updates straight away, because the vast majority of times when updates are released, they have security elements in there, which means that they found out a potential breach in the security of the system, and they're fixing it, and they're providing that fix to you to install and to protect yourself. So never delay software updates. That is quite critical to reduce the risk as well. Using things like mobile device management, and this is something that we here at Carebeans advocate quite a lot, is because the mobile device management software will prevent huge data breaches. So for example, in a scenario where you have someone that leaves the phone unattended and someone gets access to that phone, if there's mobile device management in that particular device, they will not be able to see, they will only be able to see what we allowing them to see, because everything else is protected. So it will reduce the impact of that breach hugely. And having that mobile device management, we can even do updates remotely. We can even wipe out phones or tablets remotely in case of they get lost or stolen. So it is very, very important to have mobile device management software on phones, tablets, and so on, because that really reduces the risk of cyber attacks. Backing up the data obviously is quite important. That's something that we do at Carebeans here do very frequently as well. But backing up the data either daily or hourly if possible, that is hugely important to prevent ransomware attacks, because in case of you have one of those breaches and for example, a laptop, let's say, is encrypted, you can then recover the data using that backup, and you don't have to pay that ransom to the hacker. Using strong passwords, and we've obviously mentioned the password. We show that table and showing that obviously 16 characters is the minimum, a new minimum, but using at least 12 and obviously not making them unique, not using personal details on those passwords like names and date of births, because obviously that makes it really easy to crack those particular passwords. And I give an example here of what would be deemed as a good password that is not too difficult to memorize. You'll see that the words are completely random, no words that you used normally together, and obviously with a combination of symbols and numbers there as well. On top of it, using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, that is extremely important to do, because using 2FA or MFA will reduce the risk by at least 80%. So the likelihood of you getting hacked is immensely reduced, because even if your password and username get cracked, by using 2FA, it stops the hacker in their tracks, because they got the two first initial details that they need, but then there's a third or second authentication that is required, and they won't have access to that. So it is hugely important to use 2FA or MFA. Obviously, from a healthcare point of view, completing the data security and protection toolkits, these are obviously quite important. Hopefully a lot of you already have done that. If you haven't done so, by all means, proceed with this, because there's a lot of good information out there, and this obviously puts organizations in a much better place. Conducting risk assessments, this obviously is paramount to be done internally, but also externally, because there's all sorts of expertise that are out there that can help giving a fresh pair of eyes on the assessments and on the risk assessment that's been carried out. So having this sort of external risk assessment is quite important. An example of this assessment is obviously the penetration testing, because it can be carried out and provide recommendations and corrective actions as well. Finally, updating policies and contracts. And this obviously will include your supply chain, as I mentioned before. This is to obviously include expectations and responsibilities around cybersecurity. So if you have suppliers that are not compliant or don't take cybersecurity seriously, that is a huge risk for the business or for your organization. And what's happening at the moment is a lot of the bigger organizations are becoming a lot more mature, more savvy when it comes to cybersecurity. They're locking the front door, but the supply chain is not doing the same, because the thought process behind it is that, oh, we're too small, no one will want to hack us. But the reality is that's not the case. Everyone is of interest for a hacker, and if you want to try to get to a bigger organization and you have failed to do so through the common means, you can try to hack into the supply chain and through there get access to their network. So it's quite important to only work with suppliers that are cybersecurity conscious, and for example, they have Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essential Plus, or other type of certifications or accreditations, or for example ISO 27001 compliant or certified. So it's quite important to really be clear on your expectations about cybersecurity with third parties and suppliers. And so just to give you an idea of some of the things that we do here at Carebeans to protect your data, we have obviously we encrypt all of our data, so all of the data is encrypted. We have things like Ddos Protection software. So in case of an event, that DDoS attack, that software will deal with that attack straight away without affecting the users. We have things such as blocking the accounts or locking the accounts after 5 failed attempts to log in. So that's again to prevent brute force attacks, because the way brute force attacks work is you're going to have a number of attempts to crack that password, and if that fails 5 times, we'll block the account just to prevent that type of attack. We obviously use we vividly recommend the mobile device management softwares as well. That's another way that we protect your data. We obviously back up very regularly. All our data is backed up to, obviously, if there's a ransomware incident, we back all that data. And that's the sort of things that we do here to just try to protect you from attacks. But obviously, what we do is not sufficient. You have to do your part as well. And some of these recommendations that I put forward here are down to you to execute them and to take them seriously, especially when it comes to training staff and obviously updating policies and contracts, and making sure that you work with your supply chain to make sure that they are taking cybersecurity seriously. So I will take any questions if there's any now. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Fabio. That was excellent. A real eye-opener, I think, hopefully for your care organisations as well. I'm just going to stop